everybody, and welcome to Lead Like a Boss. I'm your host, George K., and I've got an amazing guest for you today, someone who is studying something and working with something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is behavioral science. Welcome, Hugh Massie from DNA Behavior.
Hey, George, it's great to be with you and to be talking about leading like a boss.
Well, I know you know a ton about leadership, and we'll get into that in a minute. But what I'd really love to learn about and help the audience to learn about is what your origins are. I know you didn't start out in doing, assessments and psychometrics. Tell us a little bit about your background. And I think when people know that, they'll understand a bit better why you chose to get into what you're currently doing.
So just first thing to clarify for everybody listening today, even though I live in Atlanta, Georgia, in the U.S., I am originally from Sydney, Australia.
We could never tell.
Yeah,
Never.
I haven't lost that accent.
Yeah, it's almost like Texas.
Just wanted to make sure everybody knew that I was not from another English-speaking country.
Yeah, okay. All right. Which shall remain unnamed. I get it.
Well, there's New Zealand on our doorstep, and it's important to differentiate.
I get you.
So, but anyway, no, actually, I love the New Zealanders just like Canadians as well. So,
As small countries, we have to stick together.
I think so, particularly in this world. But so my origin is a little different to the human behavioral path, and that's why I call myself a reformed accountant. I started off as a CPA initially for a year or so as an auditor, and then I was a tax specialist for 9 years in Sydney, and then I also had the chance to work in Singapore and Thailand. So I had pretty interesting, varied career. And to be honest, I learned some leadership lessons, particularly when I went to Singapore, where I was at a very young age responsible for people, and I wasn't aware of the impact I was having. I was this young bull from the Sydney practice, and I had a certain way of operating there that didn't go down well.
I was going to say, it sounds like a bit of a culture.
So I got pulled up after about 6 months, and it was the facts of life were explained to me. But I left, and I think this is testament to it. I left 6 months later from Singapore to go up to Thailand with everybody, my friend. It wasn't, I didn't sort of turn it into a kindergarten, but myself into a kindergarten teacher. But, I softened up, and I had to work with people in a different way and read the signals differently, but still get the same result. And I learned to do that. And then going to Thailand, for 3 years, where people didn't in the office speak English, but all the clients did, which is where I came into play. That's another experience. And again, that tests you as a leader. And I suppose I didn't think about that early in my career.
You're just treading water, hoping to stay alive.
Yeah, but you're learning something about yourself, and you're learning how to adapt. And, I suppose today I have more words because I've gone down the human behavioral track. I've got more words to put on it. But I went back to Sydney, and I was in a more, senior position and, different environment again. But the thing I started to realize there was that if I was going to be successful, I had to personalize the experience for every client. And, we were at the time charging pretty big fees for tax advice to major corporates. And, you get a person that would ask you the question, and they just wanted a high level summary of what the answer was, what the advice was. But they'd have people out the back, in their teams that are going to read all the details. So
how old are you when you're going through all that? Because that's a lot.
So when I went up to Singapore, I was 25 years old, and 26 when I went to Bangkok, and then I came back to Sydney and I was 28.
Would you recommend that to other young professionals trying to get up there in the world?
Absolutely. I think that being taken completely out of your comfort zone, having to operate and succeed in a new culture, it teaches you a lot. And, you learn independence, but also you learn collaboration, which are in a way opposite things, but sometimes you've got to work independently, but other times you've got to collaborate.
I'm sure you had to deal with stereotypes. And those types of cultural shocks, if you will, or cultural misinterpretations.
A lot of cultural misinterpretations and a lot of subtleties, particularly in Thailand. But they're the things that you've got to cope with if you're going to survive and grow. And I think that was something that was, made me a better human. It taught me a lot of lessons about being able to operate and succeed in different environments. And I think that's carried forward in the career I've had over the last 24 years, where I eventually, came from Sydney across to America. But we're running a global business. Next week I've got to spend the week in the UK, again, a different culture, probably more similar to Australia, but a different culture to America.
And in a lot of ways, it was a precursor. I mean, nowadays, hopping across the world is commonplace because of Zoom and all the rest of it. But I'd imagine that gave you a heck of a leg up on others who at that time, traveling, working afar was something kind of new.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, an Australian sitting in Sydney and dealing with, say, Asian people on a one-size-fits-all basis never worked. And I was sort of sitting up there when I was in Singapore and Thailand, chuckling, watching some of it go on. And then, the same with Americans, coming and dealing with Asian people or even Australian people, sort of a one-size-fits-all approach, very narrow, and not realizing the impact.
Yeah.
And that some of it's not going down very well. They might have held the power financially, but that didn't mean there was respect.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I think it's great experience for everyone to try to understand that leadership here is not leadership there. I mean, different types of leadership styles are culturally viable in terms of, like, every culture has a different way of perceiving what good leadership is.
Absolutely. And good leadership is, it's needed in different situations. I had the opportunity to be on the global board of Entrepreneurs Organization. And, I went from the Sydney chapter into Atlanta. And then eventually when I decided to go on the leadership track, running the chapter in Atlanta, then the US chapters, then on the global board. But then on the global board, you've got people from, there's 9 of us from 8 different countries who've got to collaborate, make decisions globally for the organization, different ways of doing things. Their views of leadership are different.
Yeah.
And at the same time, all of the membership, at the time there was sort of 18,000 members, you're not there to tell them what to do. They're not your employees.
As anyone who's worked on a nonprofit knows.
Yeah. So you learn to lead by influence. And that's very important to lesson to learn. And how to run your business as well, because a lot of my time over a 10-year period was not inside my company. I mean, of course, I was always watching and involved, at a higher level, but it made me, one of the experiences, it made me bring people in to lead and manage the company on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. I mean, I'm heavily involved in the Toastmasters International Organization, involved in BNI, which is another international organization. And I think that's something that a lot of people shy away from is getting involved in these types of organizations, thinking, oh, it's going to drain a lot of time from me. It's going to prevent me from focusing on my business. I think they underestimate the value of building these broad networks, not just from a business development perspective. I mean, obviously that's part of it, but the networks that you build, they give you resources that you wouldn't otherwise have had.
Absolutely. And I think that, it's important for your own development to start looking beyond your toes, and I think one of the principles that I learned as I was stepping up in Entrepreneurs Organization in around, 2012, 13, to do a couple of roles in the Atlanta chapter and then eventually become president, of the chapter and then I went further globally and, regionally and globally. But what was that, I think you've got to live beyond yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the more you can do that, the better off you're going to be. And I think it's the same with running your company. You want to keep your focus. I think that's a problem for a lot of entrepreneurial leaders is they get into things that are outside their domain expertise, and that ends up burning them, wasting a lot of time, etc. But at the same time, it's finding things to bake into your business, like social impact initiatives that actually, in the end, expand the business. It's like we're just going through a process at the moment of working with the Behavioral Economics Institute, and there's 40,000 subscribers and 8,000 LinkedIn members, and what we do with that. Now, you could say, well, why would I do that? But I think you can see that this is a way to help an industry.
And it's strategic. I mean, you're being strategic.
And it help an industry have a global voice that is today fragmented.
Yeah. No, I see it. So yeah, there's a difference between being distracted, like being involved outside of your business, and being distracted. As long as there's a strategy behind it and you can connect the interest, the organization to what your business goals are, then I think it's fine. Provided you do what you did. You made sure that you had people back at the office that were making sure the house was running properly. So let's
Right. And that's a growth step. And when I did it, I brought two. I already had one there, and I brought in, or two of them there. And then I brought in two extras who were sort of what I call more heavy hitting and more experienced. One's lasted the journey, and he's still there and thriving and growing. And the other one, she didn't make it.
You're talking about some kind of a number two in the organization. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. So I sort of brought in a head of sales and a head of operation,
Okay.
and one made it and one didn't. And it's a little bit self-selection and where they want to go in their life, but that's the way it is. But, everything's worked ever since, and we're about to bring in a couple more now because I found the right people. I tend not to want to bring in senior leadership people unless I found absolutely the right person.
Yeah, that's super important. I mean, you never want to be in a situation where you're pushed up against a corner and you just got to pick somebody because you need to pick somebody. That's never a good situation.
I think people do it because they feel like, oh, well, I should have somebody or I must have it. But whereas, there is a point that to expand the business, and it's been said to me, if you're going to go on the growth path you're going on now, you're going to need more people. Yes. But I also believe when you're ready, the right people show up. I think the recruiting industry plays a role from our type of business, just going and using a recruiter to say, I want somebody to do X. That's not going to work. I've found a lot of relationships, and it's when the right people step up and we connect and we spend a bit of time together that evolution happens. I think the worst thing is to bring someone in at a senior level too quickly, and then they destabilize the business. And it's not all their fault. It's also the founder or the CEO's fault as well for allowing it to happen.
I think in Colin's book, Good to Great, I think he talks a lot about the idea of like, you're better off, like having a blank seat in your org chart, and having everyone kind of fill in rather than put the wrong person in that seat.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's ways to do it slowly. There's plenty of meetings. You give them a project, you work with them. Now, that doesn't work for every situation, but I do think having time to get to know the person, them to understand and appreciate your culture. And at the end of the day, I suppose it's like a relationship or a personal relationship. It either is or it isn't.
Yeah.
And there's either the right chemistry levels there and the person's the right fit, or they're not. And I think there comes a point, okay, we use the psychometric assessments.
I knew that was going to come in here somewhere. I knew that was going to fit in somewhere.
But there's still got to be a chemistry as well.
Read Hastings' No Rules, the Netflix book.
No.
In that book, I mean, it's an amazing take on the way they handle things over at Netflix as far as HR is concerned. And bear in mind, I know it's a book. What the reality is, I don't work at Netflix. Maybe people can leave it in the comments if they're a Netflix employee and they can let us know. But the idea of making it easy for people who are not a good fit to exit the company. And they have this kind of method, and they say, basically, if you're not happy here, then, we're going to give you a huge chunk of change, and we're going to give you this glowing reference letter, and we're going to send you on your way. And so there's no stigma, there's no you failed, there's none of that stuff. It's just, hey, this didn't work out, and we recognize the cost of keeping you here if you're not a fit. So we're going to make it easy for you to transition out.
I've essentially, I think, George, I intuitively figured that out once I started to run my own business. And maybe if we go back a step, that just before I get down that track, so I was at Arthur Andersen, CPA, decided that I wasn't
a tiny little company. Yeah.
Yeah. I decided for a number of reasons. I think it was where the organization, I could see where it was going to go and what was happening, and also just me, and put all that together. time to leave. And as I said, I was, sort of said to everybody, I'm going on the street and I'm going to figure it out. And, while I knew that hyper-personalization was going to be was the name of the game and the focus, which is what I'd started to do.
What year was that? You?
96.
Oh boy, you were ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I was. And I've reflected a lot. And sometimes these podcasts getting asked a lot of questions make you reflect on yourself. But
Where was I back then?
what I was really doing was why I was successful at Arthur Andersen was I was able to personalize the experience. And I thought, yeah, this is what's missing in wealth management when I decided that I would build a wealth management business from scratch. And so that was the goal, but I didn't necessarily have a special formula for doing it. But then one day somebody asked me, I was probably 4 years into the business, Hugh, you seem to be doing pretty well at this, but are you really happy? And I said, no, I don't think I am. And so what are you passionate about? Well, I want to help people all over the world become financially self-empowered. That had never been said before. That came out of the subconscious. And I thought, that's not exactly what I'm doing right now. And what does that mean? And I knew enough then that if that's come straight out of my mouth as fluently as that, George, I need to go and spend some time figuring out what that means.
Yeah.
So I did. And I did research for about 18 months. And that's when I started to connect the dots that this was behavioral and that I needed a system and that people had a natural hardwired behavior and people's behavior changed under pressure, usually caused by money. And then I met a psychologist one day by chance, and she said, your theory about this is correct. It's called natural instinctive behavior and it's measurable. And I said, well, okay, Carol, you're hired. I know this is why you came to see me, but can you start work with me on Monday?
You sold me. Man, let's go. Where do we start?
Right. And she said, I can help you build the framework of a system, but you need to meet these people in America. And particularly one of them had done quite a lot of work with psychometrics and people's spending habits, debt management, and the like. And again, in 2001, that's pretty novel. And so I went to Atlanta then to meet Lee, and then, 40 times in 4 years,
wow,
build a system, methodology.
I'd love to have your Aeroplans points.
Yeah. Plenty of points. Lost nights or, movie nights on an airplane, however you want to put it.
So, okay, I got a question for you because I know you've probably been asked this a zillion times, and I'm very curious. When people use the expression money doesn't buy happiness, what do you say? What's based on what you've learned over the years? Because I know you've had a lot of these types of conversations. When someone says that, what does that bring up for you?
Well, I believe it doesn't buy happiness. And, the only thing really at the end of the day that can buy happiness is fulfillment. And, I think if you put that down to why did I come to live in America in the end? Yes, I figured out the behavioral solution that was connected to my purpose. I could see that through having worked at Arthur Andersen, but also just starting to understand business, a little bit about global cultures, that if I was going to flourish anywhere and realize my potential, it would be in the United States. Now, I'm not saying this everything that I love about the United States right now, because I don't, but it would still be true that the one place I can flourish is in the United States. And I think, a big reason is that I'm a person that is able to thrive in chaos type situation.
Well, I mean, and their
happiness is not money. The World Happiness Institute or the Global Happiness Institute does a study on it.
I know.
And you don't need to have a lot of income in relative terms.
I remember watching an interview. I can't remember who was asking the question, but it was Dave Chappelle. I think it was Letterman. I think it was on the Letterman show, but Chappelle was asked, this is after he had walked away from a huge contract with one of the networks over his show. And I think it was a $40 million contract or something like that. And he was a young artist at the time. And the question was, did you feel bad about walking away from it? Because a lot of people had kind of framed him as some kind of a hero or Robin Hood, whatever you want to call it. And he was very frank in his response. He said, hell yeah. I mean, hell yeah, it hurt walking away from that money. I'm not going to say that, it was a walk in the park. It was a breeze. It was easy to walk away from. No. And then the follow-up question was, well, what do you think money gives you? Does money make you happy? And he said, no, money doesn't make you happy, but it gives you choices.
Yes. I think it gives you life flexibility, a certain amount of it. The key thing is about money is not to be a prisoner to debt, because that takes away your life flexibility. That puts you under stress again, which is the reason I got into the human behavior game, because at the end of the day, you're seeing how people's behavior changes when they're under pressure. I knew, okay, that's something to be dealt with. And my thinking at that time was around the wealth management situation. But it's true as you start to look at it in leadership as well. It's exactly the same thing. But, sticking on this point around money and happiness, if you look at entrepreneurs, the biggest cause of mental stress for them is watching somebody else have a bigger business, or they're driving a faster car, they've got a boat or a toy, and you think, gee, I wish I was like them.
Yeah.
Add in the pressure of your spouse is looking at all of that and thinking, well, why can't we do that? But you don't know that person's life circumstances. You don't know what their health is. And so, the green eyes of envy are there, but, and in a way it's natural, but if you're comparing yourself to somebody else in terms of success based on money.
I remember I read something recently, and they said, the grass is greener on the other side, that expression. Well, the only reason why the grass seems greener on the other side is because you can't smell the manure that's on the other side.
Right. Yeah. Or the manure that's just lying below the surface. How about it, you want to describe it. And I think that's key issue. And you can look at people that have got more money than they could ever spend in their lives or deal with, but they've got some kind of pressure there in terms of relationships, or people are always asking them for money, whatever the situations are, or they've got a dysfunctional child who hasn't learned, broken relationships, whatever. And that's an issue that hasn't got them happiness.
No, and I think there's been lots of studies on this, and I think everyone gets it. And I think it's like everything else that's simple. It's simple to understand, but in a lot of times it's hard to apply. It's like everyone knows how to stay fit. You eat well and you get enough exercise and you sleep right, and you'll have relatively decent health. It's simple, but how many people are able to follow that advice?
Not that many.
Yeah.
And as I often talk about, if you can't get money under control and your relationship with it right, actually it will flow through to your body.
I don't doubt it.
Stress is what causes people to age quicker. It accelerates aging. That's the conversation that in all of this longevity talk, no one's having.
Yep.
Talking about, you can go and get a replacement, this and that organ, and you can go and have these surgeries and you can take these tablets, but we're actually not addressing the fundamental problem, which is the root cause.
Yeah, because that's the harder one to deal with.
Yeah, no one really wants to address it.
Yeah.
But that's the.
But you did something to address it. I mean, I want to circle now towards DNA behavior. You decided that I can take my passion for finance and turn it into something that is going to benefit way more than the wealthy clients that I was servicing at Anderson. So talk to us about what DNA behavior is. What's the principle around it, and what's the philosophy, and how have you seen it affect people? So let's just start with the philosophy behind DNA behavior.
Yeah. So the business philosophy behind DNA behavior really sits in the principle of understanding people before numbers. So, and again, that plays into personalization. If you're going to put a tailor-made suit, if you're in wealth management, going to put a tailor-made suit on the client, then you need to understand who they are. And that's pretty much a universal principle now, where personalization is coming into every industry, and everybody wants a custom solution. I was listening to a cabinet making business this morning, technology business this morning. And again, do you want a custom made cabinet in your kitchen rather than something from IKEA? You can get that now. And that's what we're in. In fact, we're in the world of matching, and you need to do matching. You need to understand the person.
Yeah. I mean, I think we understand it.
The right people and to the right solutions.
Yeah. We understand it from a marketing perspective. Like, we understand, how to target your audience and who your persona is and all that stuff. We get at that. But now I think organizations, especially when you're looking at SaaS organizations and a lot of different types of businesses now, are being able, look at software programming. Now you can just mix and match software, just like that and put together whatever you want.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's going to challenge a lot of industries. Instead of getting everybody to learn how to use your tool, now you have to make your tool adapt to everyone else's needs.
Right. And how do you do that cost effectively, all of that type of thing, and instantly, real time?
Yeah.
And so, but I think my journey, if you took the philosophies, of the business, understanding people before numbers, how do we do that? Then, the approach has always been to understand a person's natural hardwired behavior, because that is the core person. And that's set from very early in life. A lot of it's set by the time you're 3 years old. The genetics is a small part of it, but it is your life experiences. It's your genetics. So that comes at conception, plus your life experiences to 3 years old is 85% of the core of who you are.
Yep.
So those early life experiences are very important. And, I think if you're going to flourish in your life, you may as well understand the impacts and embrace it and embrace who you are. Does it say that you can't change? No, but under pressure, you're going to probably revert back to that just instinctively.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense.
But we're put on this earth to find out who we are, what our calling is, and go and do something about it. And, and doing all of that, you got to adapt to be in society. I'm a, as I said, I was in Singapore, got there at 25 years old, and I was just operating in my natural way, which is a results driven, probably came across as a bulldog, but I learned to be successful. I had to adapt at the right moments to be relational.
Yeah.
Right. And that's changing the tone of how you talk, softening it up, sitting beside the person.
Listening a little more.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the adaptation, but that doesn't mean as a fundamentals, Hugh is a sort of goal-driven trailblazer, innovator, isn't allowed to flourish as well. That's the key, is allowing all of it to happen.
Yeah, but I think one of the key things that you said earlier is when you know your strengths and weaknesses, then you have the option. You're conscious of it now, and then you can start to work on it. You can start to look for the tools, that will help you to improve on your strengths and improve on the things that you're not so strong on.
Right. Without what I would call, George, trying to swim upriver and change who you are. That's what I think that's a key principle, is not to.
I'm really anxious, and I'm sure so much of the people listening to this are anxious. Can you give us an example of a situation where you had a leader in an organization that went through your program and said, holy smokes, now I know. And then they started to make the changes, because again, I think that when people see, like, they go from being unconsciously unconscious, like they just don't know what they don't know, to the light gets turned on and they see, oftentimes that creates a pretty drastic, reaction. Can you share with the audience maybe some or one example that will help people understand how when you get the light shone on what's going on, it can really have a dramatic effect on the outcome?
Yeah, I think that, there's lots of different examples, but recently I had a meeting with a CEO of a company, and he asked, "Can you explain?" Because I was referred to him. "Can you explain, a little bit about what you do?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, and I knew already something about him, and I said that really what I'm going to do is help you build a people-centric culture in your business if you want to. And he's got a more of an investment banking consulting type business, doing valuations, that not accounting, but the hard edge side of numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked, how do your leaders show up on phone calls?
Oh yeah.
And he said, well, they just cut to the chase, and there's no niceties. We just get into it. And I said, yeah, so how's that going to build a people-centric culture? And that's where then the conversation stopped. So I said, without using his name, how do you step in? And he said, well, I do the same thing too. That's just,
that's how we do it here.
But I said, if you want to build a more people-centric culture, there's going to need to be psychological safety. That's going to be a key tenet. And you've got to show up with some relationship skills. And that starts with, Zoom calls, how juniors are brought in, into the workflow, how they're communicated with, that they're not bullied, etc. So that light bulb went on for him very quickly, because what I talked to him about was, you probably got in your organization a lot of very results-driven people, but on the other side, if they're very results-driven, they're less likely to have relationship engagement capabilities, but that's what's going to be needed. They're going to at least need to adapt. And so, we profiled everybody in the business. We could see the mix of people, and that then became the key pillar to start to change the organization. Didn't mean getting rid of everybody, but it meant more training was going to be needed, particularly for the hard and art numbers guys, to lighten it up, because that's where one of the issues is, the consequence is they're losing junior people very quickly, and actually they're good at getting clients, but they're not good at hanging on to them.
Yeah. I love it. I think, my next question was going to be, what's the ROI in doing all that? And of course, you just hit the nail right on the head. I remember coaching a large organization, and I'm not going to mention names or even industry, but I will say that the senior partners were desperate to get some of the mid-level managers to accept partnership roles. And none of them wanted it. None of them wanted it. And one of the
which was me at Arthur Andersen, to be honest. I didn't want to accept it because I could see what was going on above, and it was, today's terms, it's psychological safety, and there was happiness. I could see it was not psychologically safe, and people weren't happy. And I thought, well, I don't need that.
One of the seniors, one of the partners, was trying to court one of the senior managers, and I was told later in confidence that this senior manager, even though their office was right across the hall from the partner, in 4 years had never gone out to lunch with this person.
Yeah.
It's yeah. And and I think that lesson translates all across the board. I mean, we're not talking about just, people in the financial world. I think this cuts across all industries, wouldn't you say?
It's in every industry. And another example was, I did one of the very first, and this is very memorable, consulting projects I did was with a major consulting firm, listed on the stock exchange, with their senior 30 leaders. And at the time, I didn't know as much about human behavior as I know today. And I was, but what I saw was that 27 out of the 30 people were low on personal trust. And that was something that at the time we weren't directly measuring in the system, but the metrics were there underneath. We now put that that's now a key factor in our metric, in our system, because when I see, the sort of the revolving door, type situation or bad cultures, it's always about trust. Or I see organizations not getting the new clients flowing in, or they're certainly not keeping existing ones engaged properly. It's always about trust.
Yeah. I mean, I love it when I have these. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but what I saw in this leadership team was they were all, it was dog eat dog, and they had all the problems we just talked about.
Yeah.
But it was worse because, and I think this is an important point, the CEO got fired about 3 weeks after the work, because what I said to them is, we need we need to build a people culture management sort of division in here, and there was a tacit yes. But 3 weeks later, the CEO got fired for inappropriate behavior around expense claims.
Wow. Talk about trust issues.
Yes. But the thing is, I sort of want to, given we're talking about leading like a boss, that wouldn't have been a secret inside the organization.
I understand.
And if that behavior is coming at the top, it's not happening. There'll be other problems downstream.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love it when I hear situations where, we're having a discipline issue with Dave, and discipline issue with Dave, and like Dave's been, missing his targets, of late, and I say, well, okay, what's of late? Well, it's been about 2 years now. 2 years? Why 2 years? Like, well, all the excuses come out. It's like, well, if you condone a behavior for X amount of time, it's like, it's considered normal. Like, this is okay. It's like.
Right. And I think if it all starts with the CEO, it doesn't matter whether this is a for-profit business, Fortune 500 business, 10-person entrepreneurial shop, or a membership organization. it starts at the top with the leadership. They're not modeling the right behaviors. There will always be a breakdown in the culture.
Yeah. Yeah. No matter what they put on the website or whatever plaques they put up on the wall or any of those things, it's not going to make any difference.
Yeah, I mean, once somebody starts putting up on the wall, trust and respect and, integrity and this sort of stuff, you're toast. If that's what you're aspiring to be, that means you're not. And it's just it's simple. It's as simple as that. And every time there's always a breakdown in culture in any organization that's got to put that there.
Okay, let's talk about go into an organization. They do the behavioral assessment. Talk to us about because I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not just like you do the assessment, you get your report, and you go, okay, this is kind of like my field guide for yada yada and blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
Your tool, if I understand correctly, it follows the user as they go through their day to day, right?
It's meant to be for life. So our goal is to work with the organization for the outputs to be either accessible from our system that anybody can tap into, or really through, an API or any other connection mechanism that the results are fed into other platforms that the organization would have, whether it's the employee software, the CRM systems, that would be, a key area. And therefore it's then used in every interaction.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. I'm certified and I've trained on lots of these different types of psychometric assessment tools. And the piece that usually is lacking is that long-term follow through. I mean, yeah, you can do a 360 or any of these things like maybe quarterly. I mean, how many times can you ask your people to do these things? I mean, I think even quarterly is difficult. I mean, annually but if you have something that's following you on a regular basis, it's far more useful.
Yeah. And I think what we want is, with the technology is people to be able to compare themselves with each other. Let's say you are the manager and you've got to step across the hallway and take out a junior manager or a junior person or do an evaluation of their performance. Look at who they are and run the conversation that way, sorry, I've got a bit of a cold today, but, is to adapt your behavior, style it to them a little bit, make them feel respected. And this levels the playing pitch. And this has been part of my whole thing with psychological safety, that the profiles used the right way can create a very high level of psychological safety. And for the CEO, like of that investment banking type firm that I mentioned before, I said to him, if you're not prepared to go through this and show your team the results, let's not bother.
Yeah.
And it's not an ultimatum. It's just that we won't work with organizations if the leadership team won't go through it and embrace it and deal with it properly inside the business.
Yeah, I'm taking a transparency course, but I'm not going to show you the results. Like, what?
Yeah. When somebody says, oh, well, that's for junior people to learn something about themselves, I don't need to worry about that, then again, we would walk away. And that could be, to the point about money. We might be leaving money on the table. And every time I've had to fire a client, not a lot of times we've had to do it, or one of the coaches, consultants, distributors in our team, it's always on a psychological safety basis.
Yeah. I love it when people push back and they say, well, where's the ROI in that? And all of those types of excuses that they usually get thrown up. And they love to point the finger at, well, in this industry, it's a revolving door. Look at all my competitors. They have the same kind of turnover, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but you're looking at like the low bar. Look at the organizations that have a high standard as far as psychological safety and communication and all that. Their performance can sometimes be 10, 15, 20 times what the average is.
And the investment to do this is relatively speaking very low for the ROI, starting off with organizational sustainability, keeping the right employees there. And, even to the notion that behavior makes money and looking at, looking at your leadership mix particularly, but it can go all the way down through the business and seeing, have we got the right mix of people here to make money?
Yeah.
Have we got innovators in the right roles? Are we prepared to take risk on innovation? How are we managing spending? I think I was saying to you, might have been to you last week when we were talking, George, I was looking at this business that turns over $4 billion. And I know the CEO there but their net profit margin's 1%. And I'm thinking, okay, tariffs is going to screw that up, but where's the other 99% gone? Right. And I don't think there's a very good deal there for the shareholders. But I see all the people certainly the leadership in the business, living pretty high on the hog, relatively speaking, there's something wrong,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think you can get used to running an organization that way, and that we've got to have this. And well, I'm in the C-suite, so I must travel on a private airplane, and I must do this and that, and be going to these events. But is it adding any value? And the companies that are financially successful have got the right business model, but they've also got the right mix of behaviors in the leadership team, and they're not all doing that.
Yeah. I can't believe I believe it because I was there, but the conversation I've seen going on with some people in certain economic circles, and there's this, the whole post, economic crisis, shaming of people that have great wealth, so you have these people who are fabulously wealthy, and they've kind of greenwashed their image. So they kind of downplay their wealth when domestically, but then on their vacations or where they may live abroad, they live like royalty, and you can't hide that from your people. It may look good, like, on your
No.
PR side, but your people know what's really going on.
Yeah, and that's the thing in today's modern world. There's no hiding from anything, and you shouldn't be trying to hide. And again, I think this is about living in alignment. There's nothing wrong with having a lot of money.
No.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a lot of money. And whether it's self-made, inheriting it, wherever it comes from, but it's about being, sort of honest with yourself and with other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
About the situation and being reasonable.
I agree, and people feel it.
Some money, and it's not saying that some money, even though if a company earns a lot of money, it shouldn't spend some of it to make employees happier or to reward the people that actually created it.
Mm.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Do you remember where was it that I can't remember the book I read where we're talking about, you look at the argument between Costco and Walmart, you've got, the Costco shareholders, up in arms about how Costco basically, is open about spreading its money around to its employees. Whereas you have the flip side. I mean, I know Walmart is trying to fix things and not correct, but change their image, if you know what I mean. But, there was this whole thing, Walmart's all about, shareholder value, give back shareholder value. Whereas Costco was, more about on the other side. Where do you stand on that kind of question?
I think that you've definitely got to reward the people that made it. But I think in some areas in America, certainly in the United States, it's very lopsided. And I think that there are a lot of CEOs that are making far more than what they should be for the risk that they might have taken.
Yeah.
I think we've got to remember, where's the risk taking? And the risk taking usually starts off with the shareholders, so that they have got to be properly rewarded. But I think if there is someone that's a genuine innovator, or teams that are innovative, then they need to be rewarded. So I think there's a balance in there. But I think when you've got a CEO making $50, $60, $100 million a year, and some of them way more than that, how does that line up on a risk reward basis?
Yeah.
Contributing when they're not the founder and being nowhere near the founder.
Yeah.
I think that's problematic, because at the end of the day, they can walk away from the job anytime, and a founder actually can't.
And I agree. I don't think anybody begrudges people like Bill Gates and the late Steve Jobs. I don't think anybody, or even Jeff Bezos, or even Elon Musk, bless his heart, because they did build something. They created something from scratch. And I mean, yeah, Tim Cook did a great job when he took the reins of Apple, and we saw what happened with the stock and all the rest of it. Yeah, I think he should be rewarded, but to the extent that Steve Jobs was rewarded, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that the part that no one talks about is it's the risk part. Some of these people, hired guns and whatnot, step into companies. They're brought in by PE firms, VC firms, or
M&A,
all of that. Or they're working in banks and whatnot, and they operate, and they lose a substantial amount of money, but there's no penalty for it. And I think that's a big problem, right? I think particularly with salespeople, that's a huge problem. They sell a faulty product or something that's broken. And we're going to see it all again. We're going to see this in the financial markets coming up over the next few years. You're going to see a whole lot of packaged up real estate deals fall apart, or the people who've walked away with a lot of money from it.
Yeah.
but no financial responsibility. And I think that's where I sort of stand, is the risk reward balance has got to be right. And in a lot of the cases, it's not.
Yeah. I mean, Grant, I think you said it exactly right. There's nothing wrong with money. And I think that if you do a good job and you bring a lot of value, I think one of the quotes that I like about from Bill Gates is the answer was to, how do you feel about, being, I think it was when he became the richest man in the world at one point. And he said, well, the reason why I've got this is because, the reason why I'm a billionaire is because we've helped create the most millionaires out there. And I think at the time, I think Microsoft was on the records of having created more millionaires as either shareholders or even employees than any other company at the time.
Yeah, and so in a way, it's been spread,
Mhm.
right? And the people that worked there early have got more. But you also look at, and I think this is another part that people forget, and and I think this is an important leadership thing, is Bill Gates and Steve Jobs did it too, but they've impacted billions of people's lives positively through the software they created. Okay, Bill Gates might have been ruthless in certain areas, and including in his relationship with Steve Jobs, but they've impacted millions and billions of lives positively with the products that they've created, and continue to do that. Whereas there are others that are making a substantial amount of money that are not impacting any person's life, right?
Or they're
Um,
doing it, they're impacting it, but negatively, not positively.
Correct. And so, I put the challenge to people that, in terms of fulfillment, reaching setting the goals, being, measurement of success, look at it in terms of how many lives can you positively impact. And that can happen in lots of different ways. And then if you have the right business model sitting behind it, most of it's going to take care of of.
Yeah. I love it when I talk to people who are, not as literate as far as, business culture is concerned. And they have this dim view of business, and they have the stereotypical greedy, businessman type of model. And when you show them the stats, when you show them the reality, and you look at how, small and mid-sized business represents way over 85% of
Yeah.
all the businesses certainly in North America. I'm sure it's probably not much different in Europe. And you can't survive as a dishonest, small, mid-sized business owner for very long.
No, ultimately, it's going to catch up with you. It will catch up with you. And I think, there's part of the tall poppy syndrome. I'm sure Canada's got some of that. Australia's got it. England's got it.
We all do.
Yeah, I think so. But, I think that you've got to, the whole thing is just to sort of go and look behind the journey of the person, and how did they create it? What did they do? Did they make reasonable decisions at key inflection points? People have put it all on the line varying times. That's what we often don't see, is how much got risked. And I think that for people who take a risk, they should get paid for it. And whether that's the founder of a business or the teams, there's people in my team that, while I'm the primary risk taker, there's a couple of others in there that have taken risks. They
Yeah.
should get,
Yeah.
in the end of the day, they should get rewarded for that, taking that risk. But, there are businesses out there where I'm seeing too much of, it's an imbalance. Yes, as a CEO, you've got a 24/7 responsibility. You've got to be taking phone calls from board members at weird times and
You're
whatnot.
traveling around the world all the time. You're missing your family, all that stuff.
Right. But for many cases, it's not comparative to what they're really worth.
No, agreed. Balance is important. I can't remember what it was at Costco. I seem to remember it was like something like 32 or 35 times the mid salary range of employees was where they capped the senior executive salaries. And I think it's the same in Japan, if I'm not mistaken. I think in Japan they even have it legislated that then there can be no more than that amount of pay equity in a company,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
disparity, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you look at a company like Boeing, and the cultural breakdown that went on there from the time that Boeing merged with McDonnell Douglas, or did the takeover, and then the McDonnell Douglas people became the leaders, and then the time they got rid of those people who caused all the problems.
Yeah.
Giving them $60 million and $80 million and these payouts to run away when they've actually essentially committed crimes.
Yeah.
If it's not crimes, it's very bad behavior. And I mean, I think in there's a lot of stuff that's
And what message is that sending?
not right. They in fact those CEOs should have actually been paying money back,
I
and they weren't. And I think if there were those kinds of clauses, we'd see a whole lot of different behavior.
Yeah. And the first shoot back you get from executives when you have that kind of conversation is, they'll say, oh, well, if we did stuff like that, we'd never be able to attract, top talent to our organization, blah, 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 blah. But I mean, if you look at other organizations, other cultures where they have rules in place to prevent that kind of disparity from happening, their productivity and profitability is just fine.
But you shouldn't get paid for doing a bad job, or a very, very bad job. And certainly not overpaid for it. And I think that's the problem I have.
Yeah.
To the question before.
Yeah.
But, again, it gets around to alignment, and that starts off at the board. And sometimes I think the boards of the companies are asleep at the wheel. And you got to have the right alignment starts there with the CEO and then down through the business.
Yeah. Well, what's that expression? You get what you tolerate, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you've got a CEO making an inequitable amount of money, that must mean there's a problem somewhere else down the chain because somebody else is getting denied.
Right.
And
in the end, the customer pays for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I think today's age, where innovation now is so important for the survival of companies, that's what's going to need to be rewarded.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, this whole amount of like widgets, how many widgets are produced or, inputs versus outputs and all the rest of it. I mean, we know now with technology, you can take 1 + 1 and it could equal 25 if you've got the right mix.
Yeah. And, so I think that there are going to be leaders out there who are going to earn their keep and plus some to change their, to move the Queen Mary pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to happen.
And that should be rewarded, right? But it's up to the boards of the company to ensure those right people are there in the business.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier about the U.S. in terms of being a fertile environment for businesses to grow is because I think their relationship to risk is different than what it is in a lot of other places. And I think the idea that you can try and fail doesn't have the same stigma as it has in other places, in other cultures.
And I think that's part of the appeal of being here in America. I think if you fail in Australia, for example, then you're toast.
Yeah, right? You're a failure. You didn't fail. You are a failure. And there's a big difference.
And no one's going to look at what happened, why it happened. You just pigeonholed as a failure. Whereas in America, and almost it's celebrated. Okay, well, what did you learn?
Yeah.
Now, if you've learned that, then
don't do it again.
Good, right? Yeah. And it's like I had a negative experience by being on a board about 8 years ago now, and I was getting invited onto another board, and I said, "Are you okay with this?" And the negative experience wasn't, you could say it wasn't my fault because somebody committed fraud, whatever. But and they said, "No, that's what we want is that you've seen all those things happen, and therefore that's experience that we should have." And that's the positive mindset that you get in the United States.
Yeah, I agree. It's the Jack Welch story, when he was a junior and he blew up a factory and he thought he was toast. He was going to get sent back to the New York office and get, handed his lunch and kicked out. And they said, basically, okay, you did everything you could have done to make this not happen. And you handled it as well as anybody could expect. So here you go. Here's your next assignment.
Yeah. But I think, you've also got to be careful with all of that. If you take, for example, Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos.
Mm-hmm.
She's in jail, but her husband has started up some other, a new blood work type business that, would seem to be a derivative of what they were doing, she was doing before.
Let's hope there's a lot of eyes watching them.
There's going to be a lot of eyes watching them, but let's see who ponies up money for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. Well, listen, we could go on and on about this. And, I love this conversation. Tell us, where can people learn more about DNA behavior? And tell us if there's anything that you want the audience to know with regards to the company. Do you have any new products coming out? Will you be doing any events? Please share what's coming up next for you guys.
Yeah. So the To learn more about DNA behavior, go to dnabehavior.com. We also have what I call a start page, which sort of will navigate you through the journey of learning more about it. So go to dnabehavior.com/start. And that'll give you a bit more of a guided journey. But there's lots of resources and materials there, videos, podcasts, ebooks, trials, whatever. You want to learn more about me, I'm all over it there. And so I think that's the main thing. My LinkedIn account, Hugh Massie in Atlanta, is also fairly fertile for anybody that wants to learn about me. The big thing, the new thing is that we have taken psychometric assessment to the new level where it can now be done digitally. So we've got what we call the DNA digital scan. So AI can actually complete the assessment for a person rather than it having to be done. So that removes the friction of getting assessments done up front. So let's say the CEO I mentioned before of the investment banking business, you've got 1,000 people. I can give him a look at everybody in the business out the gate.
Wow.
To make decisions. And then to find maybe where the opportunities are, problems, and then we can figure out where to go. And then we might start doing the assessments. Well, that's a transformational approach.
Yeah.
So we're working with a wealth management firm. We can help them now know all of their clients and match them to advisors up front rather than spending years getting everybody profiled.
Yeah. And I think that's
the big thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of using technology positively, because now you get rid of all of the friction of gathering the information, and now you can just focus on applying the information.
Yeah, and I think sort of with it, my next evolution with all of this obviously is the digital scan. I set a goal, and the reason we built it is I said to my team at the end of 2023, what if we said our goal was to have, to impact 1 billion lives, right? And have behavioral data on 1 billion people. What do we need to do? Well,
you can't do 1 billion 1-hour assessments. That's just not going to work.
It's not. And absolutely it's not. And we had already some years before worked on a digital scan type solution, but it was not quite right to roll it out. And we shelved it, but then we dusted it all off, refined it. The technology's way better. And now already we've got 200 million people done in the last few months.
Wow.
So we're going to hit that 1 billion goal, I think, earlier than 2030.
That's amazing.
So that's the big initiative. I think the other one for me is to put a global voice onto behavioral economics and bring that really to the fore, because behavior is influenced by money and money influences behavior. And, that's fundamental to understanding people before numbers, how leaders make decisions, investment decisions, and we need to make this prime time. It affects everything.
Yeah, I think the days of putting financial concerns and shareholder value above all else are over, but now we need to figure a way forward to help organizations understand that you can do good and do well at the same time. The two aren't mutually exclusive.
Nope, they absolutely go together.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Hugh, on that note, I think, man, this has been an amazing interview. I can't wait to do this again with you. I really want to dive in next time we talk about your CEO experience. I read about the Titan group and that what you're involved in. I think we can make that the subject of another podcast altogether, because I think there's a lot of learning to be had in your experience with executives and leadership teams. So I'd really love to dive a little deeper into that next time.
Perfect, George. Well, I'd love to do it.
All right, man. Thank you so much. And we'll catch you on the flip side.
Absolutely. Thank you.